Hey everybody, welcome back to Nifilmism. I am Ryan.
I'm Drew.
And
Jordan.
I was going to introduce you, Jordan, but you stole my fucking thunder. This is Jordan. We have a third mic today, and we talked about a couple topics that we were going to be hitting during our last episode, and now we're actually going to follow through on a promise for once.
Yeah, and we're actually not going to wait about a month and a half before we do an episode and blame work-related problems for that.
It's been, what, 2 weeks since we've done an episode?
Yeah. We're not creatively bankrupt yet. Haven't reached that point.
We're not.
The barrel still has a bottom further than you think.
We're not Star Wars. So today we are going to be talking about historical movies. One of the topics that we've wanted to do for a while was about Braveheart, whether or not it was actually a good movie, and that led into a different conversation entirely. And so what we're going to talk about today is, if you're making a historical movie, is it more important to just have a good story? Or if you've chosen to do something historical, you've already pigeonholed yourself into doing something historical, so how accurate do you have to be? So where is the line between accuracy and a good movie?
So, yeah, it's kind of, like, at what point do you decide just make a biopic?
And even then, even with a biopic, how accurate does that biopic have to be in order for it to be a good, accurate movie? How much do you care? Are you more concerned about...
Or even how compelling is that story anyways? Like, just off the top of my head thinking about it, like the John Nash story, like,
oh my God,
how much of that was actually as compelling as that? And then I bet, like, the Ed Harris character, I bet the fake roommate, I bet a lot of that was fabricated to try to give more interest to the schizophrenia.
Dumping things into a mailbox?
Yeah. I bet a lot of that was completely fabricated. I bet it was just he struggled with a really, really rare condition and still managed to get that far academically. Yeah. But and at that point, I mean, how much of that is true and how much of that is fictitious? And at that point, like, you had a kernel of a good story. Was it worth telling it that way if it was a lot of fabrication?
For those of you that aren't familiar with it, we're talking about Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind, right? That's what we're talking about? Okay. Yep. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page.
But I mean, and then like, we haven't seen the new Churchill movie yet, but I bet a lot of that is pretty factually based because a prominent figure of that regard, there had to have been a lot of, like, record keeping, especially when he was in Parliament and things like that.
And you're not trying to portray crazy. If you're trying to portray crazy, you have to portray crazy somehow.
And keep people interested. So that's when the story element comes in. And at that point, was that worth telling?
See, I think a lot of it comes from, or at least that makes them good, is that they focus more on an event. Similar, like how Lincoln focused on one aspect of Lincoln's presidency, which was the passing of the, what was it, 13th Amendment.
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day. What do you call it? They somehow made C-SPAN interesting?
Yeah. They took legislative discussion and made it fascinating. I mean, Spielberg did it, so you would expect that he would do it well.
Yeah, I guess to an extent, it's the dilation of how much factual you want to be about something. Like, if you are going to be, okay, our main character is Winston Churchill, and we want to, like, focus on one pivotal event, one speech. You want to make sure that the events leading up directly to that moment in your film are as close to perfectly accurate as you possibly can. But then as you get out a bit, it can kind of muddle and get grayed a bit if you need it to, pad a story out.
I'm going to ask a bit of a loaded question. Now, I've got a history degree, but I think something that needs to be addressed is history boring? Now, I love history, but when you get lost in the details, if you're losing yourself in William Wallace's parents or whatever you want to talk about, are those sort of details just something that isn't worth making accurate because who the fuck cares?
Oh, I too have a history degree because I am also a hack. But no. The minutia makes it real, and reality is cripplingly boring.
Like, thank you. That's
no. History is more interesting thematically.
Yeah.
And when you have the hindsight to be able to see, this happenstance conversation was a pivotal moment in this figure's life, but, like, you don't have, when you realize like, oh, he was like taking a shit and not this guy like washing his hands afterwards. Like that's boring and mundane. I mean, I guess there's a quirk to that, but like that aspect of history is pretty boring when you think about it. And the fact that the old axiom of history is kept by the winners and things like that. I mean, how much of it is that shouldn't be, that's actually more interesting or could actually be even more boring and make things that seem monumental minuscule actually.
I mean, you're basically packing in, even if it's a specific event, you're packing in a year's worth of that person's life into 90 minutes to 120 minutes.
Yeah.
So you should be able to get the dramatic parts, the fun parts, the exciting parts, and pack them in. But if you did it strictly by what happened, you would have a lot of time jumps, you'd have a lot of boring conversations, and the movie would be far less entertaining.
Well, then the other end of the spectrum is if you're going to focus more on period piece, you have that problem of films always wanting to have cultural touchstones that are muddy themselves. Like you think to like even just like popcorn stuff like the Back to the Future 3. You have a lot of touchstones of like Western culture that probably in reality were things that were 30 to 40 years apart. Like maybe like the Single Action Army was 30 years removed from
okay.
a certain type of Stetson 10-gallon hat. Like
But
that's more of a Western thing, but in general, like in a lot of period pieces, you have a lot of like this is 70s, this is 70s. It doesn't matter that they were 6 years apart in reality. They're both gonna be here simultaneously in our version of the story.
And ask most people to differentiate between 12th and 14th century medieval armies.
Yeah,
and
yeah. Maybe it's more plate armor, less chain armor, less chain mail.
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but at the same point, you're not really, unless you're really into medieval history, you're not going to be able to be like, nope, that's bullshit. That helmet design wasn't crafted until like the 13th century.
Don't get me wrong, there are egregious cases of that. Like if you watch the 13th Warrior, which I subjected myself to again recently. You've got Vikings, one with a gladiator helmet, one with a conquistador helmet, and it's something that when you're watching a movie like that, if you know what it is, it might take you out of it a little bit.
Yeah. So what did they do? Did they just raid the prop warehouse?
Like, that
looks good. That looks cool.
I get it. They were trying to differentiate between these Vikings so that you don't have the Hobbit situation of, oh, you've got a bunch of dwarves that all fucking look the same except for some facial hair.
Yeah.
And I don't know any of their names. They all end with I. So, whatever.
But I mean, at the same time, unless you're really looking for these inaccuracies, if the story's good, are you really going to be paying attention to the fact that, oh no, that gauge wasn't on that plane until like post-war? Like, are you really going to notice that stuff? I mean, you might, if you have a medical condition, you might need to see somebody about.
Flipping it though, it takes something, a good period piece. Like go back to 2003 and watch Master and Commander, which would have swept the Oscars if it wasn't for the fact that Return of the King was that year. And that is a period piece that is accurate to a T. Everything in that movie is 100% what it should be, but that's based off of a novel. There's no historical event that you could directly say, hey, this is what... I mean, don't get me wrong, it's based on stuff during the Napoleonic Wars, but there's no one specific event. This was a novel about that time period that the movie was then based off of.
Was it written in the time period? Was it contemporary fiction at the time?
I don't remember the year that it was published.
It couldn't have been.
No.
It was probably just extremely well researched.
Exactly.
But those are kind of the loopholes. If you're doing a film adaptation of what at the time was contemporary, so you have the easy way because everything that's going to be in there should be described as it was at the time.
But of all the movies we've talked about so far, I know it's not a lot, but Master and Commander is easily the best of them. It's a historical period piece, but it's not based on any one specific historical event.
Well, the setting lends itself to that too, of it being a maritime story. A lot of that is going to be in the narrative of the book and how those ships were manned and crewed during that stretch.
So I guess we talk about Braveheart now.
I guess if we have.
So
where do we start?
I'll just go right into the question. If Braveheart was made today, with what we can do CGI wise and with camera shots, had the same exact story, same exact direction, Mel doing everything he did, even the same score, you can have that too. Would it be as remembered?
I have 2 words for you. Pearl Harbor.
I was hoping for fucking no. But...
Jordan, you've seen Pearl Harbor, right, Jordan?
The Ben Affleck one?
Yes.
Yes.
I think what was it? Was it Team America summed it up? Pearl Harbor sucks.
There were a lot of explosions. I mean, Michael Bay didn't disappoint.
Cuba Gooding Jr. sure did shoot that AA gun, didn't he?
Was he the best part of that movie?
There is no best part of that movie. That's a trick question.
But that's just it. You take a historical event and you cram a love story into it, and we've had a lot to blame Braveheart for. Titanic, we can blame Braveheart for.
Okay, so Titanic probably had tons of really good real-life stories that people would give a shit about. And they chose a fake one about 2 characters that I didn't give a shit about. And I cared so much more about all the poor people that were locked like animals in the bottom of the boat. And I'm supposed to care that Leo stole a fucking diamond.
Yeah, same thing with Braveheart. You've got what could be a compelling story, a good revenge story, and you turned it into a love story, which historically, I'm sure we all know this story.
I think part of what might have hurt Braveheart was I'm wondering if he really wanted to tell a historical drama, but then the character drama supplanted that somewhere in the writing process.
Oh, absolutely. But that's what the whole core of this discussion is about. Yeah. What is it a good movie? If you're making a movie about William Wallace, how accurate do you have to be?
What do you commit to? Do you commit to telling your fictionalized version of accounts, and in that point stop saying it's a historical fiction, or do you just you stay enough to fact and try to squeeze as much drama from the factual encounters and factual occurrences, or you just do something like Dunkirk and just make a masterpiece where you don't focus on characters.
Yes, thank you. As I look at the
unopened copy, also unopened because I am too lazy to watch my own movies.
I had to own it. It was $30 for the Steelbook copy at Best Buy, but I had to own it the day it came out, and now I still haven't watched it.
Well, for the 5th time, you haven't watched it.
Well, yeah, I spent $60 in a week at IMAX watching this thing.
But I mean, I don't know. It's like The Longest Day is an ensemble movie, but maybe it's just because it's a product of the 60s that it just doesn't... It holds up to a degree, but I mean, what's another good example of historical fiction? Patton.
Yeah.
How much of that is just romantically fabricated about the monumental figure he is, and how much of it is actual fact?
His real life voice was so squeaky.
But sure, George C. Scott was fantastic.
Yes, he was.
But no, I mean, that's one of those movies where I'm willing to accept that. Yeah, I bet most of these encounters are utterly fabricated. Maybe except for probably the only true one is him slapping the soldier in Italy. Because I'm pretty sure that's documented things that had happened, and that was like...
I think you're right.
That was one of those scenes that you're like, wow, we've been building this guy up to be like, literally like the pinnacle of man, and then, oh wow, like a realistic thing happens, and then you look into it and you're like, oh, that actually did happen. He did get like reprimanded for that.
Do we even want to talk about 300?
300 does... No.
Jordan, you look like you want to say something.
This is a no Snyder zone.
Well, slow motion aside, yeah, that movie, it's not accurate. It's literally just entertaining. If you even want to give it something to be praised about, is that it does entertain.
But you got the only thing you really got to give it credit for is neither side is like relatable to anybody in a current audience.
You're not friends
like you don't frigging care what happens to the Spartans or the Persians.
You're not friends with people with goat heads.
Like,
well, the
or
Persians
8 foot tall naked male model Persians.
The Persians weren't like that. They didn't do that. They're one of the most religiously tolerant of the ancient civilizations. We don't get any glimpse of that.
But we're supposed to like the super militant pederasts.
Was John Milius involved in any part of this movie? Because it feels like
it probably would have had something that made me want to go back to it if he was.
Did you guys see the second one?
No. No, it looked
bizarre. It doesn't make any sense.
At least the first one had a few one-liners that were from actual historical texts. Like the whole, oh, we'll block out the sun with our arrows. Oh, then we'll fight in the shade. That's historically accurate. That's at least what some.
And they got the number of Spartans right.
hey, factual accuracy for one.
Did a guy actually get kicked into a pit?
Who knows? Was there an inhuman ogre? Who knows?
I'm waiting for Bud Light to get that pit and be able to kick a person into it.
Dilly
somebody into the. What was the Spartans pit called? Do you guys remember what it was even called?
I don't know. Oh my god! Now I'm just thinking about when he climbs up to see the Oracle, and you're just like, oh, this is just Zack Snyder wanting to get some like nascent prepubescent teen girl tits in a movie. I'm done here. Goodbye.
All right, moving on. Gladiator.
Okay. Gladiator is a period piece. It's what I was saying of, hey, let's get like late nearly Christian era Rome and like the decadence of the Colosseum with like the invasion into Gaul, like middle of Rome expanding their empire, and we're just gonna mash them together and we're gonna put Russell Crowe in it, and somehow an action picture is gonna win Picture of the Year.
It was a pretty weak. I mean,
I like that movie, but I do not think it was Academy Award movie.
It was a pretty weak year. Whatever it was that 90?
You and I have done this at work. Oh no, we always are diligent at work.
Yeah.
But no, we've looked up the Gladiator year, and other than the year Shakespeare in Love won, pretty weak in our contemporary lifespan in terms of years.
So who were the real characters in Gladiator? Joaquin Phoenix's character was an actual person.
Actual person? Yes.
But the character that was portrayed in the movie is different.
Very much so.
Yes.
They feel a lot of Nero.
His dad,
Marcus Aurelius,
is a real person too.
Yes, and they got him fairly accurate.
Did he actually get killed by Joaquin Phoenix?
No, they did not. They were sharing power for a while, from what I remember.
What?
Yeah.
How did that work?
I guess okay for a while, because he didn't end up getting murdered by his son, so you have to assume that everything was at least functioning.
And Maximus was real too, you said?
No.
No.
I think we're just listing characters. No, Maximus is not there. I can't find anything.
Just a faceless... Actually, Spanish in the movie. He's a Spanish character.
There was no Spain. He would be the Iberian.
Yeah.
No one would be chanting Spaniard. It's fucking Iberian.
Yeah. But no, that's another one of those examples of you're just putting in things that you associate with a time period and a place in a certain time, and hey, this is historical fiction, and it's like, yeah, it's crafted to be in that setting, but it's not historical at all. You could use names and people.
All right, I swore I would never do this, but do we want to compare Dunkirk and Saving Private Ryan?
Saving Private Ryan's not as good as people think it is.
It is.
I think Saving Private Ryan. I think visually is exceptional. I think its story, even though its story is a real story, in a way, because there was that issue of families losing lots of sons and then pulling them out. It's just, even if it's a real or like that's a factually like based story, it's so hokey.
And I think one of the things about Saving Private Ryan was the D-Day scene necessary to the plot of the movie?
Oh, in so much as Tom Hanks is your main character, but is he really your main character?
But you could start it on the beach after D-Day, and the actual half-hour landing scene wouldn't be. No, don't get me wrong. It's
brilliant padding. It's brilliant padding for a film.
It is one of the greatest scenes ever put on film. There's nothing that I've seen compared to the D-Day landing in the last 20 years, just in terms of technical mastery. But is it necessary to the plot of the movie, or are we almost talking a two-part movie? Like
it's not necessary to the plot, but it's necessary to setting the scene of what it's tone. It's there for tone.
So I think that lingers with you for the entire movie.
Yeah, it lingers with me 20 years later.
Yeah. I think it's definitely important to the movie, not necessarily to the plot.
No, definitely not. Not to the plot, but it's there to set tone. It's there to establish tone.
Fair enough.
I mean, you kind of have. It's because it's. I think it's there to establish the fragility of life in those situations, so that when they do get hunkered down in that village with the sniper, oh shit, like it's really easy for one of these characters I've spent the last 20 minutes like getting to know to just get killed easily.
So you're saying that scene is very much a fuck you to the Dirty Dozens and the Audie Murphys and all of the ones that portrayed World War II soldiers as action heroes?
Yes.
Okay, fair.
But it is overly long. It is overly long for what you would need it for tonally. But again, it was there for wow factor, and
it wowed.
Yeah, exactly. That probably is what won. Did it win Best Picture? That year?
No, it lost to Shakespeare in Love.
Oh my!
Incredibly accurate film.
Yeah, getting back on topic.
Joseph Fiennes is a good actor.
Speaking of what was up against what, the year that Braveheart won Best Picture, it was up against Babe, which means that if Babe would have won,
George Miller would
have already had an Oscar.
Aye.
The
Academy is hokiness. But what was I gonna say again? Just having Joseph Fiennes on them, another period piece that's probably greatly fictionalized is Enemy at the Gates.
Yeah,
the Zaitsev was an actual sniper in the war. Prominent. Again, this is the Soviet Union, so they really propagandized him. So how much of what the movie is depicting is what the state wrote for him and not who he really was.
I have not seen that movie, unfortunately. So
it's entertaining. It's entertaining.
Okay.
It's not something you'd watch. It's something I have because I just have like a World War II movie collection.
Yeah.
Regardless of quality of the film. And that's how you end up watching art house stuff like The Thin Red Line.
Do you own Fury?
No, I haven't seen it.
It's shit.
I would imagine it's got Shia LaBeouf in it.
And there are it steals lines from Saving Private Ryan.
Just
like
whole hog.
Yeah. Do you remember the scene in Saving Private Ryan? When they're actually during the D-Day and during the landings, the one trooper gets up with a flamethrower and scorches the bunker, and people start falling out down the hill.
Don't shoot him.
Don't shoot. Let him burn. There's a German tank on fire, and they're bailing out. And I believe it's Brad Pitt that yells, "Don't shoot, let him burn." The same line. I've seen this movie before, Brad Pitt.
That's a shame. But yeah, I mean, any other films where is there anything you could think right now of that where there's more fact there and they just threw it to the wayside because they wanted to tell more of a story? I think biographies are where you're going to see it the most. Is where they're going to deliberately throw things away because they don't want to show that this guy was married and divorced 7 or 8 times, and we only want to show his first marriage because things look nice then. Things like that. I feel like that may be more of a biopic problem than necessarily a historical fiction problem.
And then you've got to draw the line too between historical epics and biopics.
Oh, like Alexander, the greatest film of our generation.
The only movie I've ever walked out of was Alexander. My friend Dan was there, a few other people, and I heard, after the first battle, when Alexander collapses, I heard Dan angry under his breath, "Alexander didn't weep." And at that point,
you just laughed because you can't stay after such biting criticism.
And I'll do credit to this is back at, if anyone lives in the Buffalo area, if you remember the old location of the Regal Cinemas, when you could go in by Kahunaville, that's when we would have seen it. We were walking out, and whoever this manager was saw the group of us walking out and said,
"New."
Yeah, he said, well, I think he thought maybe we were theater jumping or something. He said, "Oh, what's wrong? Why are you leaving the movie?" And we just said, "Oh, it's bad. We're just leaving." "What were you watching?" "Alexander." "Oh, follow me." And without us asking, he gave us a full refund and told us to check the reviews next time.
Hopefully that guy is still in the theater.
I hope so.
Do you guys
Sir,
know
you
what
are a
movie
hero.
inspired Alexander?
What?
Troy.
That's a story for another topic because
No, go for it.
oh my god.
Well, Troy, I understand it's not a good movie, but by any means. But I was thoroughly entertained by it. I mean, I think it's just because Homer's Iliad is an interesting story.
Here's my problem with Troy. Troy is myth. It's myth. It's not historical fiction. It's myth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, anybody worth their salt who's actually read mythology knows that what the Greeks considered heroic is fucking weird compared to what the modern world considers heroic. So why in the hell did they think that, hey, we're gonna make a movie based on, Helen of Troy and the Iliad and the Odyssey, and like we're gonna keep Achilles as the hero? Achilles is fucking horrible. He is a villain.
Yeah.
He is an asshole throughout the entire story. So why not just make it about Hector? Because Hector is the true hero to a modern Western society.
Well, I think they did a good job of portraying that.
They did a good enough job.
That the Trojans were the more likable group.
That Orlando Bloom is a dick.
Orlando Bloom's a dick. But
Menelaus is even bigger a dick. And you know who's even bigger a dick?
Achilles.
Fucking Achilles.
And what is his name? Agamemnon?
Agamemnon?
Whatever.
Wait a minute. So what you're saying
Who was it? Brian Cox and who were Menelaus and Agamemnon?
I don't remember who played.
I'd have to look it up,
So basically what you're saying is that Achilles is the Tyler Durden of mythology, and they're both played by the same guy.
Well,
Brad
the other thing too is you're going to tell the story of Helen of Troy and just completely get rid of the gods entirely. But Achilles is still gonna have a water nymph for a mother. But you don't have the gods, except for his mom's a god.
Is it the pre-Gritty reboot? Is it the pre-Batman Begins?
You're right. They kept emphasizing the fact that the gods weren't
he's other-powered.
He destroys the Temple of Apollo, slices Apollo's head off, and he's like, "Where's your gods?" And
it's like your fucking mom, dude. Your mom's a sea nymph. Or a river nymph.
Maybe that's why he was so comfortable doing that.
Possibly. No, I was so mad because the first time I watched Troy was when I was in college and I was taking mythology courses and I loved that stuff. Like that was when I was at the peak of really enjoying that stuff. And I'm like, this is half-assed. Like, why are you gonna do it half-assed? Why are you gonna do it? I guess kind of how the Greek way is written. Because that is not our norms in society now.
Yeah, my classics professor, I think the weekend it came out, I heard him just talking about it's not Patroclus, it's Patroclus. They couldn't even get that right. And I didn't bother asking him what he thought about it.
And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Homeric stuff is pretty fucking boring. Because when it comes down to it sometimes, it sounds like Greek rap videos. Because a lot of it is, hey, this guy had this much armor, this much, this, that. He had 75 horses. He had 75 swords. He had 16 songs written about him. He had 6 cousins coming with him. It's okay, I get it. He's got a bunch of shit with him. But no, getting off, get back to the topic. That movie, I guess, in as much as we want to talk about dramatizing something that is established, written fact or established, story. Just everything about Troy is annoying to me, except for Hector, because Hector is a cool dude and deserved better than his shitty brother.
Bana.
Oh, pre-Hulk, right, or post-Hulk? Wait,
I think right before. I think that might have been his introduction to not Australian audiences.
All right, so I think that the takeaway so far has been most movies that are historically based. I don't know. I mean, is it?
I'm in the boat where if the fact is that cut and dry and boring, I'm okay with a little bit of fiction coming in to make it a little more interesting. But the pivotal events, if you have enough detail, be as factual as you can with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, I mean, it's Hollywood. You gotta fudge the truth a little bit.
You have to sell a movie.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of when a movie was super historically accurate, but
Lincoln.
Lincoln. It's a
That's
perfect
it.
example. Yeah, really, they're all going off on these weird fake stories. The one that comes to mind most recently is because I watched Narcos on Netflix. I know it's not a movie, but it's a TV series based on a real life figure, a larger than life real life figure. That some of the facts about his life are absolutely absurd, but they say always before, most of this is fictionalized. Be prepared, and it's a great show. I think because it's fictionalized. It's because I bet his life really wasn't as crazy. He's just like the numbers of how wealthy he was is the craziest part.
Here's where I'll end where I want to say. When it comes down to it, I'd rather watch like the exploits of a fictional character like Bill the Butcher than watch a real movie about Tammany Hall and like how the politics work there.
And I guess that begs the question of why did for all these years Hollywood go back to the well? How many times have we seen Robin Hood?
As many times as they want to try to get it. I think the problem with Robin Hood is they want to try to get it more factually true seeming. Like
for a fictional character.
Yes. But I mean, like the most recent version is not a terribly entertaining movie, but it's probably as close to realistic for that. The Russell Crowe version is probably as close to realistic for that character as you're going to get.
I think the Disney one is the most realistic, him being an animal.
He's a fox, right?
Hanging out with a bear.
I mean, when you got to choose between Russell Crowe like doing a fun movie and a stunt ass with Kevin Costner, it really depends what you want to pick.
But only one of those movies had Christian Slater.
Oh God! What was it? Oh fuck! He made it.
Fuck me! He cleared it. It's the second time this has ever come up on this podcast too. So I guess the big takeaway is that after discussing this, Hollywood, it's okay to be fictional as long as you're telling a good story. If you're not doing either, if you're telling bullshit melodrama and only sprinkling in just a little bit of historical accuracy, just enough for the background of a story, you're probably missing the mark. You need to strike that balance between the two. And outside of Lincoln, I don't really know how many have hit that mark. Final thoughts, guys?
I think that sums it up well enough. I mean, if don't lose the plot. If your pivotal moment is a historical event, make sure that's factually represented as close as possible. Because if that's what was the kernel of the idea of, hey, I want to make a picture about that, then don't lose that. Like, make sure that stays true. Because again, we don't want people who, we live in an era of half-assing things, and we don't need more kids seeing movies and thinking that that's what actually happened. I mean, we already live in the age where Wikipedia is considered a reliable source. So last thing we need is stuff being put out by the emerging conglomerate that is Disney Buena Vista.
And I was thinking about that earlier. Back in the mid '90s, if you watched Braveheart, the only thing that you had to know if this was accurate was either a history book, which God forbid anybody find, or when the History Channel actually did like the real versus real.
Yeah, back when the History Channel wasn't about ancient aliens. Back when it was the Nazis and Gun Channel, which was awesome.
When they had CGI dogfights. It was awesome.
Get home from school and what's on for 3 hours? The Way of the Gun? I know what I'm doing instead of homework.
Now it's, man, I gotta check with my guy if this actually costs $500.
All right. Well, I think we've really addressed the topic that we wanted to, but we will be back for a second part to this. We still haven't talked about everybody's favorite movie, The Patriot, and a number of others. So thanks for listening to this one. Stick around. We'll have a part 2 up to this shortly.